Welcome to today's episode of Positively Geared. Hi, Lloyd.
Hey, Alex. How's things?
I'm very well, thank you. We've got a special guest with us today in the studio, Todd Huggins of Collaroy Constructions. He's been a builder on the Northern Beaches here in Sydney for the past 30-odd years. Welcome, Todd. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
So, Todd, we're really excited to have you in today. Lloyd talks about building a dream team in his book, Positively Geared, and part of that dream team is a builder. There's so much light that we believe you can shed on your own personal experiences. You've obviously done some of your own projects and built your own dream homes, haven't you?
Yes, that's correct.
The other aspect is that we want to talk about what should people look for in a builder. There's obviously people out there today that might be listening. They might be planning their next move. They might have aspirations to build their dream home. So we just want to really help give them a bit of knowledge that they can walk away with today and say, this will allow us to, make better decisions.
I think personally that meeting the builder and going through it and getting a real feel for the person themselves, you've got to have a really good relationship because you're working with them up to 12 months at a time. And it's a very stressful period for the client. So it's good for them to make sure they feel very comfortable with the builder, have a good background check on them, and just the relationship is very open and communication is really clear.
Lloyd, when you were sort of early into your portfolio career, we talked about your first duplex development. I think one of the challenges for you at the time was that it was actually outside of Sydney. That experience in terms of what you were looking for at the time, what did that look like?
Yeah, that's right, Alex. My first duplex that I built was outside Sydney in Armidale, and using a local builder there that I actually didn't at the time actually go and meet or anything like that. So it was all sort of over phone and over internet. I think the biggest problem that I had at the time was not really knowing all the questions to ask and all the things to do a background check on, such as, is the builder licensed and what are the insurance needed for building and stuff like that. So Todd, maybe you can shed some light on all the things that people should ask for when they're actually checking out a builder.
Yeah, it's very important first of all to do a license check on them, which you can do through the Service New South Wales. Then you want to make sure their insurances are up to date, which they should hand over with the contract or beforehand when you're signing things. Homeowner's warranty is part of it, so that has to be included in any contract. Other things are really just seeing if they've had any problems with Department of Fair Trading before, because that can be a big help or a big sign or red flag if there's something wrong with them.
Todd, for people who are approaching the first build they've done in their life, they've possibly been living in established dwellings until this point. At a really base level, what does the process sort of look like from the initial conversation to a builder to sort of getting the green light to build?
Well, of course, it all depends on what the client is after. The most important thing is getting with the builder and seeing if what you want to build is actually achievable for your budget. That's obviously a very big issue with people always want to get more than what they can actually afford. So it's better off to sort of work those things out quite early of what your budget is and where you can get to.
Lloyd, I know that you talk about in the book, part of your skill set is helping your clients negotiate with builders and, get a good contract, if you like, or make sure that they're getting a perceived good deal. What have you used in the past to sort of filter through all the builders that you meet on a daily basis and choose the right ones?
I think one of the things I do, Alex, is look at the contracts and liquidated damages clauses to see the dates that the builder's going to finish the builds and to see if they're going to have any late completion clauses in the contracts if they were to go over time. Because if you do lock in a builder and if they're going to take 8, 10 or 12 months or whatever, you want to make sure that you try to get the build finished, within that time frame and that it's not dragging on for 2 or 3 years. The other thing is also, and I like using fixed price contracts because it provides a bit of assurance against, variations and things like that. What's your view on that, Todd?
I look, about 80% of our work is cost plus actually. So it just depends on, for me, the client and builder relationship. Once you develop a good relationship with them, it seems to be a very fair and honest way to go forward. Either way is good. If you're new to the building and you haven't done it before, I'd probably recommend a fixed price contract. The only issue is with fixed price contract is people like to change their minds quite often. Hence, then will be variations, and that creates arguments a lot of the times as well. That can become a harder part of it.
I think the problem there also is that when there's variations, there needs to be a cost to the variation because you've got a contract in place and then they change their minds and you want to do all sorts of things. So yeah, for that reason, I think cost plus works well. I think fixed price probably works well for people that are maybe building for the first time, but also for investors who are really just looking at the numbers. If you're building a home to live in, then you're probably going to have a closer relationship with the builder to get exactly what you want.
So for listeners today that are hearing all of these terms, cost plus, fixed price, Can we really break those down? So cost plus being 80% of your business, Todd, what does that mean for the layman listening today?
Well, for the layman, it means if you buy a hamburger, for instance, it costs you $8. Well, then I'm going to pay for that $8 and charge a 15% to 20% margin on top of that. So each item that gets purchased for the build, you get report on a spreadsheet, and then you're paying for that and the margin that I cover.
That's a great analogy, the hamburger.
And
hamburger analogy.
Expensive hamburger, but I guess they are these days.
So, Todd, I think getting straight into it in terms of, let's say that there's a site that a client's called you up about and they said, look, Todd, we've found this great block of land. It's on a slight incline. Possibly we can talk about one of your previous experiences when buying yourself. Where does the conversation start with you? What information do you typically need? Obviously, you would deal with council a lot. What does that sort of look like?
Well, there's two sort of ways about this. If I'm building a place for myself or looking to buy one, I generally go to the site, have a look around, have a look at the places nearby. One of my favourite things to do is to jump on the roof and have a look, because if we're going to put a second level on or something like that, see what aspect you got, what the future potential can be. And a lot of people miss that. They don't do that sort of stuff. So that's something I like doing. And whether it's a flat block or different things, it's obviously going to be an easier build. But if it's something with a slope, there's a lot more costs involved and stuff like that. So they're things you have to be a little bit wary of.
Because obviously level blocks of land with good frontage, which to the eye look pretty straightforward to build on, they typically do come at a higher cost for those exact reasons. With blocks that might have an incline or more complications to build on, what do those costs typically constitute, the additional costs in terms of on a construction level?
On a construction level, you're looking at things like geotechnical reports for landslides. You've also got to take into account you're taking out either rock or dirt removal. There's a lot of spoil that has to come out, and that's quite expensive to have removed. So things like that add a lot of cost to the job. And then you've got water issues to make sure water doesn't come into the dwelling as well once you start growing out of the ground. So there's quite a few things to be wary of in that sense.
Lloyd, in terms of, in your experience, because we've sort of got both sides of the coin here, a real professional builder versus, your sort of run-of-the-mill Joe Blow, for lack of a better term. What have you found is sort of the defining factors between the two? And Todd, I'm obviously keen to get your thoughts, being in the trade for such a long time too.
I think one of the defining factors is a builder who actually really knows the site and understands exactly what it's essentially going to cost to build on the site and can give a fair guidance on that, and then understands exactly what the council requirements are in an area. A lot of the time that we can be building on something that's very sloping, and then the builder really underestimates that, sometimes maybe just to please the client, and they might give an estimate of how much this might cost to build on. But when they actually, get the geotech report and the survey and everything like that, it ends up being a lot more expensive. A lot of that comes down to, I think, the builder trying to be sort of nice to get business, but also them being inexperienced in terms of being able to quote properly on a job in the first place.
And Todd, what are your thoughts?
Oh, Lloyd's just nailed it in one there. You guys come into the job sometimes and they might be from the area. They're obviously quoting it. They might A, need the work, or B, lack the experience of knowing how to get that stuff out. So it can cost you a lot more money, and they're just trying to win the job. So some of those costs will sneak up on you, and you've got to be very careful in that sense.
And just, I guess, building upon that, I mean, am I right to say that most jobs are done by tender, depending on, probably not more resi stuff, but if you're doing more commercial, it's typically by tender, isn't it?
Commercial, definitely by tender, yeah. That's all they ever do.
So I think whether it's more a tender-based deal or even just resi when, a homeowner's getting a few builders out to quote, what's some great advice that you feel might help people choose the right builder and sort of filter through? I suppose when you're getting 3 different contracts put forward and 3 different opinions, it becomes hard for people to know which direction to head in.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the most important things is getting some history on that builder. So being able to talk to previous clients is always a good thing, because everyone, there's 3 different opinions. It's hard to believe which one's right. And obviously price comes into it a lot as well as the consideration. So getting a good background on previous clients is a very important thing.
Todd, we were speaking just before we jumped into the recording booth, and you mentioned also that you've built a few dream homes now. Yeah. Typically, most people build one. I know Lloyd's finally been able to buy his dream home, and Lloyd, you're very happy there now, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely. Love the place, absolutely. I didn't actually build it though. It was already built.
A lot of people that listen to the series, Todd, that's their end goal. It's they're using properties of equal to eventually buy or build their dream home. Walk us through your past few dream homes that you've built now.
Yeah, we've had quite a few. What happens a lot for me is my wife's on a TV show, so she's going into people's homes a lot with a home improvement show. She constantly sees new things and comes back home to me and says straight away, "This is what I want to do in my next home. This is what I want to do. This is what," and it's like, okay, here we go again. So constantly, every time we think our dream home's the one and that's perfectly it, there's new things that she'd like to do and I'd like to do from what I've seen in my builds as well. And then we start thinking about the process and going, okay, we're probably ready to go again now. So the dream team's important. We make decisions very, very quickly. And in my experience, when I'm doing builds for clients, it's a long, dragged out process of picking tiles, picking taps, picking stuff like that. It takes time and sort of adds to the job. As long as you know what you want to hit and what you want to get, it makes it a lot easier.
How often, Todd, do you find that your clients are really indecisive about picking those things like those tiles and those other inclusions?
Quite a lot. Everyone's worried what it's going to look like at the end and how if they've got the style right. And it's a very hard thing to be able to get it correct. So it happens quite often.
And what about the, I guess, the architectural design? I mean, a lot of people get pretty head up about the, even the height of the ceilings, and particularly if you're on a sloping block near the water or something, you're going to have, some part of the house having much higher ceilings than other parts of the house, and different levels and things like that. That must take a fair bit of working through as well.
Yeah, it does. Generally, by our stage, it's usually they're set with the architect and so forth. Minor adjustments here and there, but yeah, it's very important to get those things right.
Todd, you mentioned Dream Team before, and we've touched on it many times in the past. Who are the people as a builder, as a director of a building company, that you would constitute as part of your Dream Team?
Guys that work for me are part of my dream team, and all the contractors I have, I use the same contractors all the time because everyone knows things we've done in the past, and we can look back on, we did this here, we did that there. That to me is a very important part. And again, my wife helps me out with some of the design aspects of things when it's needed for clients. So that's the sort of main part for me.
And in terms of architects, draftsmen, interior designers, is that something that you typically would bring to every job, or is it based on the client?
No, I generally don't work with one or two architects or anything like that. I generally, the client comes to me and then they've already had everything drawn up and so forth and bring it to me. So I'm not aligned with an architect or an interior designer as such.
And in terms of, I mean, I've heard this many times over the years, just, having coffee or having a chat to builders. Architects typically, have a vision for a home, and then you guys have got to go in and build it. What's that relationship typically look like?
Depends. Sometimes it's really good, and other times it can be a bit difficult because everyone dreams about a beautiful design and so forth, but sometimes as a build, it doesn't work exactly that way. So it can be a bit touchy sometimes.
Todd, in terms of people that are focusing on building a dream home, so to speak, is there anything that they should be looking for in terms of finding the right builder for the right architect? Is it important that the two are aligned, that they've worked previously together? Obviously, that might allow them to be able to see some past projects and what their project might look like.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's important to be able to separate the two as well. Have your architect and builder not always aligned. It works both ways, of course, but it's good to have a little bit of break between the two so you can get some good information off both of them then.
Todd, being in the industry for a long time now as a builder, you've also mentioned that over time you've bought and sold property. How do you approach things from your end? Because obviously you've got a lot of insider knowledge that most mum and dad investors or homeowners don't have. Has the way you approach buying and selling property over the years changed as you've got more experience in your field?
I think definitely the style that I end up doing changes, which is what I pick up from other homes that I've been doing. And other than that, I think I've sort of kept the same principles the whole way through that I see. Important bits that I like to pick up as we're going. So I like location. I like an old place that you can do a lot of work to. Things like that are important to me.
Lloyd, being in the field as a buyer's agent, what are some of the things that you typically will advise your clients on in terms of helping them find the right site to build on?
Yeah, so there's a number of things that I need to look for when I'm looking at the right site, and it comes down to what their goals are. Obviously, where they're wanting to live and everything like that. But you're finding a site, there may be easements on the block. There may be problems with sewer. There may be problems even with which way the block slopes, and depending whether they're building a single dwelling or whether it's a duplex, there could be problems with stormwater. So there's a few things with site that you've actually got to tick off the box as well to make sure that that's not going to be an issue when it comes to building and to getting council approval. It's also important to really check on the client's budget and make sure they've got an understanding. So if you're building on a slope site, it is going to add a lot to the build costs. So if you are someone that has a bit of a budget, you need to look for something that's a little bit more of a level site as well.
Todd, there seems to be a lot more prevalence, particularly in the last few years and possibly longer, but more just top of mind for myself over the past few years. We're seeing a lot of private certifiers now. Granny flats and secondary dwellings are becoming very popular here on the Northern Beaches and other areas of Sydney. Has that been a good thing for your business? Has it had any bearing on your business? What are your thoughts around secondary dwellings?
I like the idea of secondary dwellings. I haven't had much to do with it. What I've noticed, though, in a lot of our work has been generational living. That's been a big thing in the houses we've been doing. So, you got your grandparents there, the family as well. A really, really important thing, I think, is using as much land as you can. And if you can put a granny flat on a block, that's terrific.
Yeah, we've actually done a bit of that with some of our clients. We've had people who have bought and then put a granny flat at the back, which has actually housed some relatives. And then there's also been occasions where we've actually built duplexes where our clients lived in one side and actually housed some in-laws on the other side. So that's actually worked quite well as well. Todd, there's been quite a few builders that have gone bankrupt over the years in particularly Melbourne and Queensland. Can you explain for our listeners how they're protected by home warranty if something happens to the builder that they're using?
Yeah, homeowner's warranty is something that you have to have by law, which you have to have in place as a builder before you sign the contract. Now, that protects the client if the builder does go broke, that work will continue under another builder who will be appointed by the insurer. So that covers them to make sure that if anything goes wrong with that person, whether they pass on, the company goes bankrupt, there's cover there to get the build finished.
And is that up to a certain price point where that would come into play, or is that from a cheap job through to a $100,000 job?
Yeah, anything over $25,000 has to have homeowner's warranty.
And Todd, in terms of, obviously you use a lot of contractors, when you're doing bathrooms, for example, waterproofing certificates like that. Is it important that people are getting copies of all of that stuff?
The builder should supply all those copies at the end of the job. That's part of his job description. So he has to handle those in before he can get a final certificate. So the builder will get all those together for you.
Lloyd, when you did your duplex development, if we can track back to that, what were the challenges you found in terms of working with your builder?
I think initially, lack of communication with that particular builder, but I guess in that particular region, there was a shortage of builders to sort of choose from. I didn't really know a lot of what I was doing, so, I sort of was managing the DA process myself, and I was using a draftsperson that was attached to the builder at the time and wasn't so happy with some of the plans, and it so happened that the plans were submitted to council, and then the council didn't like some of the stuff that was submitted, and there's some changes needed to occur. Over years of experience and, further duplexes I've done, I haven't had those sort of issues because I've been more on top of that, but as a first experience, the builder should have been more on top of those sort of things. Things sort of dragged out a little bit probably from that first development. I think I had a late completion clause in the contract, but it was actually longer than it should have been in terms of the fixed price contract. So there's a few things there that I subsequent years have done a lot better, but that's all through experience. So that's kind of what you do when you do your first one. I think the experience from that one and ongoing ones since has obviously helped me to be able to have a very streamlined approach these days when I help people choose builders and get into deals.
Todd, how involved do you guys get with that process in terms of dealing with council?
Generally, most of the time, when it's come to us, we've virtually got a construction certificate ready to go. Obviously, when we give our homeowner's warranty, that then moves the process forward. But generally, by then, it's already happened. And any adjustments, meantime, we'll help with. But most of the time, the architect and so forth take care of that stuff.
Looking back on your past 30-odd years in the business, why did you get into building? Did you fall into it? Was it something you always wanted to do?
I think I just fell into it, to be honest with you.
Not too bad, 30-year run for something you fell into.
Yeah, it's not too bad at all.
Knowing what you know today, almost 3 decades of experience under your belt, what's changed for you? What are some of the lessons that you've learned on the job that you can share with our audience?
Look, no matter who you are in the building game, you make mistakes. Okay, so the main thing is just to own the mistake and make sure that you learn from it. So everybody has them. Some people try to hide them and pretend to blame someone else. The main thing is just to own up to your mistake, learn from it, and don't do it again.
I like that because I think particularly for a lot of people that are building for the first time, whether they're white-collar workers, whatever the case may be, there's no real expectation of what it's like to do a build. And, I mean, things can go wrong on the job site all the time, I'd imagine, even today possibly.
Oh, constantly. Even today when it's raining, rain's one of the biggest issues on the job sites when we're going through.
So I think it is good for people listening that, whether you're working with a builder that's been in the industry for a week or 3 decades, setting that expectation that not everything is always streamlined and seamless, isn't it?
Correct. There's something that always goes wrong, no matter what it is. It could be one subcontractor doesn't turn up when they're supposed to and delays everything then. So as long as your communication's open and you talk about it and let everyone know what's happening, I think that goes a long way.
I think that's a really good point. I think that's the biggest issue I've had with some builders that I've worked with in the past is that lack of communication and the lack of them wanting to own the problem and trying to pass the blame. Whereas I think it's easy just to own the problem, admit to it, and try to find a solution. But I think that can be said for anything you do. And myself as a buyer's agent, if we make a mistake or someone in my team makes a mistake, we own it. We try to move ahead because sometimes things don't go smoothly, and that can be said for anything that you do in life really. But own the problem and move on, I think.
Todd, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of somebody that's just bought a block of land and is now looking to find a builder. A lot of people's decisions are driven often by fear. And, some of the pain points I've found people face when looking to build is that, for example, what happens when things go wrong? So let's say, for example, person's gone to council. Like, how involved can you guys get with that process? How important is it that you've got good experience dealing with the local council in terms of being able to help the client navigate through that stuff?
Yeah, it is important that you've got local knowledge of the councils and private certifiers. It depends who you're using. That sort of stuff is very important to be able to help them. And I understand, like, every person who's building a house is spending a lot of money. So you really have to have the trust in the builder that they're spending your money and that they can help you along the way and guide you with the councils and stuff like that.
How important is it to maintain that relationship with the builder, or what does that relationship look like, which is a better way of asking that question, once the job's done? I'll give you an example. I had a client that had appointed a builder. The conversation, we're having a barbecue over at the house once everything was done, and he noticed that the floor was slightly uneven. He's going, "Oh, we wouldn't have used that person again." Is there much of an after build relationship that you try maintain, or?
Oh, definitely. The after build relationship's important. You have to look after the home for 7 years. To keep an open dialogue the whole way through is still very important. And again, like we talked about before, owning any mistake that pops up, because the mistakes mightn't pop up straight away. It could be 2 or 3 years later, something might pop up. So you need to be able to go back, rectify that and things, which is very important.
So what would that look like if, let's say, for example, let's use the example of an uneven floor. If I were to give you that call and say, "Hey, Todd," and I'm sure you don't get those calls because you look like very good at what you do, how would you approach that?
Well, first of all, you need to see where the problem's coming from. Could be a water leak somewhere or something like that. It could be a faulty product. So you just have to get to the bottom of the problem. But again, everything comes back through the builder. If it was a subcontractor's issue, you still have to organise the subcontractor to come back and sort that out. It's important that the builder has a good relationship and has constant subcontractors, because then you can call back on them at all times whenever you need them.
And would it be fair to say that that's why it's also good to work with a builder that does use the same subcontractors all the time?
Yes, correct. Because otherwise someone might come into town and then do the job, disappear, you never see him again, and then you're stuck with the responsibility of who fixes it.
Lloyd, looking from an investment perspective, we touched briefly on before, a lot of people that are trying to build wealth through property, the investment mindset is that we focus predominantly on the numbers. What do you suggest that people do in terms of finding the right builder in their area from your side of the coin, being a buyer's agent?
Well, firstly, it's really important that you got to look at whether you're building a home or whether you're building for an investment. But you also need to look at the demographics. So, we're situated here on the Northern Beaches, quite a high demographic, good income levels. So, you can't be skipping on the build. So if you, for example, are going to build an investment property, then, you're not going to build a basic, 3-bedroom property that's got 2.4 ceilings and, really basic and everything like that. You do need to build something that's a bit special that does actually go for the demographics. So you might want to have something that's a little bit more architecturally designed, maybe some 3-metre ceilings at occasions, maybe, ducted aircon at very minimum 40mm stone bench tops instead of your 20mm or your laminate bench tops that you might stick in another location. In another suburb that's not quite the same kind of area. So that's very important to look at, because although it's about the numbers, it's not just about the numbers when you are buying the property and building the property, but it's also about the numbers when you're selling the property. And if you try to skimp on everything up front to try to save, then you're not going to make those returns on the other end, because you're building the wrong kind of property for the demographic. If you're buying a home, then that's a little bit different. If it's your dream home, you're going to be wanting to put all those upgrades in there to make it a perfect property that over time is going to get you some good growth in the market as well. And I've always seen the homes that I've lived in to actually be part of my overall portfolio, because they've actually had some good growth anyway, because I've always lived in locations that have actually had good growth.
Todd, I'm really keen to know, and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast today will feel the same way. Project homes, they've always been, over the past 20 30 odd years of your career, they've always been quite prevalent. But, I see a lot of people gravitating towards them because, particularly on the northern beaches, for example, just the cost to secure land is quite expensive. What's your feeling about them? And what are some of the things that would differentiate, a construction company like yourself from a project builder?
Look, a project builder is important because not everyone can afford an architecture design home. So they're important to the industry. They're required. Personally, I wouldn't go with one of them in the Northern Beaches area for myself. Exactly what Lloyd just spoke about is the number one reason for that. They've got a way better buying power than what your custom builder has got. So we can't compete with them on price no matter what.
And in terms of on a construction level, how would you differentiate? Obviously, the build quality is not going to be as good, and that's the value proposition, right? Breaking it down further, what are the main differences for people that are on the fence right now trying to decide which avenue to go down?
Well, the way I explain it to any client is I'm the builder who's there every day. I'm on site every day. With project homes, you've got different subcontractors coming in. You haven't got one person there the whole time. So for me, I'm there every day. I can explain to the clients what's going on. I've got a good communication. With project homes, they're managing like 20 or 30 homes at a time. So it's a different outcome altogether.
So they've really got site supervisors. So they might be building 30 homes at a time, and they'll have 2 or 3 supervisors who are just going around to the sites managing their tradespeople. Their tradespeople often aren't the same tradespeople all the time either. They basically get whatever they can get to work for them at the time. Good custom builders, as Todd has been saying, generally have the same tradespeople work for them the whole time, so they know the quality of the work, which is important because they know what sort of work they can do each time around and each property that they build.
Todd, we talk a lot about, and particularly one of Lloyd's big concepts in his book, Positively Geared, is being able to create instant equity in a property. For people listening today that, they might be living in a home that's due for a bit of an update, is there a formula that you find works really well in terms of being able to add good value to a property, obviously enhance its perceived value in your line of work that you'd recommend to a client? Is it starting with kitchens and bathrooms? What would you recommend to somebody that might not have $500,000 to $1 million to spend in a new build?
Bathrooms in kitchens and so forth are really good places to start. Even adding on a deck or something like that would be very good. Little minor adjustments, knocking a couple internal walls out, making it a bit more open living, a bit more livable, because everyone now, wants a big open space and so forth. Little bits and pieces like that can be very good.
So guys, everyone, when they're looking to build a home, has a budget, whether that's $500,000, $1 million, or $5 million. Now, you on a daily basis, Todd, would be approached by people that have, grandiose ideas of what they want to do. Obviously, it's really important that people learn very quickly how to manage their budget. Otherwise, they're not going to be able to complete their project. What's some advice you can give in that space in terms of, for example, it's a $5,000 vanity versus a $1,000 vanity and things of that nature?
I think it's very important to get an idea of how much things are worth. So people might like a certain tile that's worth $200, where the budget really only allows $50 a square metre. So you've got to be very careful on those things. Inclusions are an item usually I put in as a lump sum. So then the client has to go out and look for the inclusions. Inclusions can be ovens, stoves, dishwashers, stuff like that. It's such a variety in price from a $1,000 stove to a $12,000 stove. Which one do you pick? Which one works? That's a very hard thing to do, and it's a personal choice. So they're things that are very important to get right and keep within the budget.
And in terms of having the benefit of working in the space, let's use for example, a Bunnings budget toilet versus a Villeroy and Bosch. What percentage difference is there really in terms of the product?
Oh, there's a lot of difference in the product. Your top-end toilets and stuff like that will last for a long time, 25, 30 years. Your Bunnings ones they're going to break eventually. Components on them that aren't made as well. And, of course, the comfortability when you're on the toilet.
So it is safe to say that there is beyond, I suppose, branding benefits.
Oh, of course.
The more you spend. So it's safe to say that it's almost important as an aspiring build to understand what's most important to you in the build, where you want to allocate those funds to, and then you can help the client sort of go down the right path.
Oh, definitely. And every client's different. Like one client won't care if they've got a toilet from Bunnings and another client will. Every client's different and everyone has got different tastes. So you just have to work all that stuff in account.
What happens when people run out of money?
The job usually stops.
And is that something that you have encountered?
Oh, sometimes people have got problems with banks or bank issues where, the loans aren't coming through or there's a hold up or they're selling investments or something like that. So it happens occasionally.
Is that before you start though? Because I assume that if you've got to sell investments, that would happen before you start the build, because they would have to have a finance approval before you actually start the construction.
Yeah. Sometimes people want extra stuff as they're going through, like it might be added onto the contract, like they might want to do a pool or something added onto it as well, little things, or add a deck onto the project as well. So then they got to sell some shares or something to get that. So there's usually things that happens with things like that.
Lloyd, I suppose in your field, you would probably spend a lot more time focusing on the numbers when helping people manage a budget, particularly for an investment property. What's some advice that you can give people listening today? We know how important it is not to, particularly strictly from an investment perspective, not to blow out the budget. For example, the last thing you want to do is spend $1.5 million to secure a site, spend another $1 million to build on that site, and you get the property valued the next week and it's only worth $2 million because the house 2 doors down, which is reasonably comparable, sold for $2 million.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I guess when you're building a home, sticking to the budget is just as important as if you're doing an investment. And it really comes down to looking at what your total budget will be and then looking at those intricacies and then working out exactly how much you can actually spend on appliances, because they can certainly add up, as Todd was saying. You're going to buy that $12,000 stove or the $1,000 stove. So you really need to look at things overall. And if your budget is, say, $30,000 for kitchen appliances, then you need to actually keep within that. So you'll have a stove, you'll have a fridge, a microwave, you've got your range hoods, all the things that you need in there within that budget. So I think that's really important. And having that, same as what I've talked about in my book, is just have that budget planner and just rework that. So you actually, instead of listing things like your outgoings and your credit cards and all that, you can actually replace that with stovetop and fridge and everything when you're looking to build. So you actually understand how much they're going to cost and make sure you're not blowing the budget, and work that out before you sign any contracts with the builder, because you don't want to be blowing it.
Todd, where do you find in your experience most people overestimate or underestimate when budgeting?
Oh, I think it's on those things we've just touched on, all the appliances, tiles, things like that. The general build, or the building material, like your wall frames, your bricks, all that sort of concrete, I can get down to a T. It's the add-on stuff like your carpets, all those things, they usually blow out.
Is it worth sort of getting an understanding of what it costs to build to sort of lock up, and then working out how much they've got to spend beyond that on all the superficial stuff?
Or if they do their research beforehand and understand that they don't want to go over $50 a square metre for tiles, they don't want to have to buy carpet that's too much and stuff like that. Just work your budget out earlier, and you can lock those things in.
Yeah, so this is actually the reason that I work with fixed price contracts for my investor clients, simply because it is about the numbers. If we're building in a premium location, then we'll do a premium build, but it can still be fixed price because it's still about the numbers. But it really comes down to making sure that they're not going over the budget. And if they know exactly what the whole price of everything is beforehand, it makes it much easier for them. Because the minute you start going cost plus for an investment property, that's where things can really be blown out. I think that's probably something that can just be left for when you're building your dream home as such, which is essentially what Todd specialises in.
Something, Todd, I'm interested to know is, my past experience when renovating. A lot of materials are obviously floor coverings. They're all in a price per square meter. Now, that's great if you work in the industry and know the differentiation between, $20 a square meter versus $100. Obviously, one's far more expensive than the other. That's obvious. But, for people that don't have a lot of experience, is there a general rule of thumb in terms of, okay, well, for floor coverings of this grade, you'd probably want to spend $40 a square meter, for example, like for a composite versus a hardwood, like, in terms of setting the expectation?
Yeah. I generally go through and look at that when I budget for something, and just look at the medium. I look at the tiles. I look at sort of a medium price and stick to that sort of price. But again, everyone's budget's different, so it's hard to be able to say this is what you should be averagely looking at.
Another thing too is, I like to think that, when you're buying a home, a lot of things in life are negotiable. In terms of when you're dealing with suppliers, how much negotiating power do you think there is for people that are looking to get better prices on materials?
I don't think there's much negotiation power at all anymore. Like, we don't even, as builders, get very good discounts anymore. Everyone can, the internet's out there, everyone can search prices, no discounts anymore.
It's interesting that you say that. I quite often have clients come to me who are not happy with the price of the build or something. We're always trying to get it down. Obviously, my job as a buyer's agent is to try to get them the best deal. Funny the amount of times that people think that they could just get a much cheaper deal by the builder just lowering the price or something like that, when a lot of it just comes down to materials, and this is what it is. And then they've got to pay the tradespeople and everything like that. And there's just not the margin in it for builders that people think there is a lot of the time.
That's correct.
Todd, what standards do you apply to your business to ensure that you can deliver the best outcomes for your customers?
Well, again, our most important thing is our honesty, and we just have great communication with our clients. So if I was building a house, that's the first thing I'd look for, to make sure the builder has a very open dialogue. If he's a bit shifty or doesn't like to tell you all the information, that's something that I'd be concerned about, because that's what I want to set in my business.
What are the red flags in terms of, you mentioned withholding information? Is there anything in particular that somebody should be really upfront and honest about?
When I give a quote, even sometimes when it's cost plus, I still have to give a quote. You have to give an estimate. I give a spreadsheet with all the information on there. So every item's broken down. So you can have a cost item for every single part of the build. I think if people give a 1 or 2 page just saying this is what they're going to build and a lump sum at the end, that's a concern for me because you can't see where the costs are.
Lloyd, we talk about dream homes. You've obviously now got to a point in your life where you've been able to buy your beautiful dream home. Is there anything you'd like to shed some light on in terms of the conversation?
Yeah, well, I think we've had a great chat today with Todd today regarding building dream homes. I think a lot of our listeners, Alex, are investors who are basically building portfolios so they can get themselves in financial position in the future so they can buy or effectively build their own dream home. So I hope that people can actually take some inspiration and stuff from today's episode in the future, can really look at having that dream home. And because not everybody's in that position to be able to do that now, but that's what we really want people to be able to achieve in the future. So it is about one of the goals in life should be able to have that dream home.
Todd, thanks so much for joining us today. It's been really great having you in the studio, and I think we've really helped uncover some great little tips and hints just to help people get on the right track in terms of building.
No worries. Thank you very much. Pleasure.
Thanks, Todd.
Thanks, guys.